Hello everyone, so this is Lala, and today I'm going to be reviewing and discussing the Inferno 2, which is the final season in Era 1, and this is the first season chronologically that is on streaming services, so I was able to watch this season a lot earlier than the other 9 seasons in this era. I believe I watched this season around the time Battle for a New Champion started airing, or a bit beforehand. So it's been roughly a year since I watched this after the first time. So at the time, I really did like the season since I thought the competition was very interesting. I thought the drama was very good, and you can tell that they're on their stride here. At the same time, I didn't understand a lot of the context because I couldn't watch the first 9 seasons. So because I watched the first 9 seasons and then watched this one during the rewatch, now that I get the full context, I'm just so much more invested in the cast, in the dynamics, in the interactions, so on and so forth. I'm so glad that they permanently went back to eliminations after they went backwards with Battle of the Sexes 2. And you can definitely see that this is the start of the period where a lot of the veterans at this point were starting to become less prevalent on the show, or they would outright retire. The Inferno seasons always have the more interesting, not theme, but interesting structure where you have two teams competing, you compete for money, two people get nominated, and then there's the lifesavers and all of that jazz. I just found it to be really interesting. I think the pacing for Inferno seasons are very good, especially compared to Gauntlet seasons. And you could just tell that there are so many all stars on this cast. I will say that the newbies, for the most part, were kind of weak, with the exception of 1 to 2 parts. But in general, I feel like we're out of the period where the rough patches of the foundation of the show is over and done with now, and you can definitely see how this would kind of hint towards era 2. Eric wants redemption for his early boots last season, and Julie is in a better place, though she's expecting to be on bad terms with Veronica. Though she ends up slut shaming Veronica, kind of just showing how hypocritical Julie is, despite her Julie good girl image. Brad wants redemption from being screwed over last season, and Jody is worried about being a newbie slash rookie. They are told that the teams are good guys and bad asses, as there are no more real world and Road Rules teams, and clearly they did this because Road Rules was cancelled at this point. The bad asses are Abram, Karamo, Danny, CT, Derek, Rachel, Tina, Tanya, Beth, and Veronica, where the good guys are Darrell, Landon, Mike, Brad, John, Jody, Robin, Julie, Shavonda, and Jamie. Tina and Tanya still do not like one another after last season, but Tina doesn't see Tanya as competition. The challenge is called Surf Torture, which is a bunch of military challenges, and the searchers are on their asses. It's pretty fun and neat challenge, though it's very simplistic, but it's a classic in the media in general for a reason. Derek and Abram win it for the bad guys team, and of course, Abram loves it. I forgot about their playful feud with one another, which was even on. Actually, no, I feel like Abram and Mike had the playful feud with one another. Anyways, it is a men's inferno as the opposite team chooses who to go in. The bad guys choose Dan, and the good guys choose Mike, who is definitely playing up his persona at this point, since it's clear that he is deep into wrestling and his career is about to pop off at this point, hence this being his last challenge season. Everyone is having their fun, and Julie talks about how she got married, so her spirituality is doing good for them. Derek and Landon end up wrestling, and it gets a bit too tense, where some people are worried that it will be a confrontation. And I guess this is just a foreshadowing as to what happens later on in the season, I think. And apparently, this is something that they always did, and it was always like, you never really know how far this is going to go. Juice It Up is the Lifesaver Challenge, where they have to grab the fruit hanging and squeeze it into a blender, but they're doing all this in stills, which does make the relatively simple challenge a lot of fun to watch. The badasses win the challenge, with CT and Mike winning the Life Shielders. John decides that he wants to go into the Inferno since Jesus sacrificed himself, and comparing himself to Jesus is ridiculous. It does seem like a part of him does not want to be here. I did some research, and apparently he did this because he had a gig that he wanted to attend where he would have made more money doing that than the show, or he would have gotten sued had he not done the event. So that's why he did this. Julie doesn't want him to go in, and they clearly have a bond over religion. John does end up in the Inferno, and the elimination is hang tough, where they have to climb a ladder and try to get one another off. And this reminds me of the elimination in Total Madness that Jay and Asaf had to do against one another, but obviously a different variation. Dan ends up beating John, and most of the cast are sad, but they can't give him a hug because the cage is in the elimination. And I guess this is the first season where the eliminated person doesn't go back into the house to pack their stuff and to spend a few hours there after their elimination. Julie breaks down over this and hates that the other men were selfish. John never accomplished much on the challenge. He was on season 1, which was not considered season 1 at the time, and during the quote-unquote real challenge seasons, he was booted painfully early on both. Clearly the show just wasn't for him, and his personality didn't really fit either. Beth and the mean girl trio of Rachel, Tina, and Veronica are talking about Tanya and Mark allegedly sleeping with one another. Apparently, Tanya told Beth that Robin is no longer with Mark after last season, and she watched a movie with Mark, and the she being Tanya. Robin ends up calling Mark, who denies that anything happened between them, and he's been consistent with this story apparently over the years, once they show flashbacks or whatever. And Robin confronts Tanya about lying about hooking up with Mark. Tanya doesn't care about the situation at all, but she wants to know who is telling her this, as she never dated Mark and isn't dating him. Robin and Tanya are going at it, and Tanya says that Robin really isn't worth it, though Robin calls Tanya a liar. Robin calls Tanya a whore, and of course, a guy would fuck a hoe, though Tanya doesn't care about being called a hoe, and she isn't a liar. Rachel and Veronica tells Tanya that Beth was the one who told them, so Tanya ends up confronting Beth about the situation. She wakes Beth up out of bed, and Beth denies everything, and Beth didn't even want to get out of bed. Beth and Tanya are arguing with one another, and Tanya decides to throw Beth's stuff in the pool. Not only that, but she ends up emptying her clothes from her bag that's already in the pool. This is all just so ridiculous, but so good at the same time. Tanya demands for Beth to have a conversation, and she doesn't want to have the conversation, meaning Beth doesn't want to have the conversation. So Tanya grabs even more of Beth's stuff, and Beth sees Tanya throwing her stuff on the pool. Beth gets all of her stuff out of the pool and thinks that Tanya is a loser for all of her antics. Of course, the guys are loving all of this, and then Beth yells at Tanya, stating that she never said Tanya fucked Mark. So now Beth doesn't feel safe, which she consistently mentions throughout the episode. Tanya ends up having to stay at the hotel because of this, and Beth refuses to go to the mission until she's compensated for everything. Though Beth does end up going, if I remember correctly, and the bad guys are annoyed with this. The challenge is called X marks the spot, where two people are tied up to some sort of anvil, and one of them has to be dropped in the perfect X spot. The badasses win the challenge, and Robin pushes for Tanya to go in, but that is shut down. Beth knows that one of her or Tanya is going in, but the official nominees are Tina, with Tina seeing this coming, and Robin. Tina snaps because she didn't even get to vote, and she knew that she would be thrown in against Robin. Beth is over her team, and after hearing them trash talk her, and the real reason for this was that Beth supposedly skewed over some of the women, especially the Mean Girl trio, during a photo shoot that they were doing, and she took extra money, though she apparently was one of the people who initiated or brokered the deal, so that was probably why she got more money. But it's just a mess from what I read about this behind the scenes. Julie and Beth are friends. I was told that CT and Abe are throwing the lifesavers to get Beth as a nominee, and she confronts Abe about throwing the mission, and I think Derek tells her to shut up here, though Abe denies all of it. She ends up arguing with her entire team and shares to them that she will fuck their shit up if they mess with her, and that's such a Beth thing to do. The next challenge is Run for Your Money, where you pick up your money and get as much as you can. I thought it was going to be a boring challenge, but a bunch of cast members are wrestling and getting rowdy with one another through it, making it a fun watch. Jamie and Shafanda give Robin some money so that she can win the lifesaver, but the badass's plan is to give Tina the lifesaver so Beth can be nominated. They have to count the money that they collected, which will probably screw up their plan, and it actually does. Brad and Robin argue with one another about the woman's undercover plan to get Robin the lifesaver. Mike and Derek end up winning the lifesaver, and the badasses are pissed since they can't get Beth up due to her chagrin, or due to their chagrin and Beth's happiness. But the good guys win the mission overall. Beth intentionally miscounted her money so her team would not win the challenge or the money. Tina and Robin face in Shack Attack, where they are attached to a harness and are pulling against one another, where they have to get a ring. Tina ends up winning the Inferno and sending Robin home. Beth argues with Veronica because Veronica will sell her family down a river, and a new winner needs to be made, and Veronica didn't really have much of a response. For her limited amount of time in the season, Robin did cause a lot of drama with the whole Mark and Tanya situation, so I see why she came back after her performing poorly this season. Definitely fine with her going here, since it seemed like the situation was relatively settled, and it didn't involve her once Tanya and Beth went at it. Beth decides to quit because she's tired of not getting any sleep and having to worry about what are you getting ruined, and she feels so unsafe. Most of the people really just don't care, and you really see Brett going in and bashing her, calling her an old lady, which is ironic because he is still doing challenges as I record this and is older currently than she was on the season. So this is the best that I recognize. Despite going early this season, she did last a lot longer here than she did on her other two seasons that were like actual challenge seasons. And she actually got to do something. She is very entertaining, and I like how she is natural with it. A lot of people are talking about the alleged alliance between Mike and Abram, and they claim that there is no alliance, though Dan really isn't buying it. The challenge is called Shirt Off My Back, where they have to take off their clothes while standing on a beam, where they transfer clothing to people on the opposite side of the beam, who then jumps off the beam. Or actually, I don't think you have to do the jumping off part. And the process happens all over again until there's one person left, or they all switch out their clothing properly. It's a pretty interesting challenge watching it take place, as there isn't much danger or real anything that's too crazy about it on the surface, but it is difficult. The good guys win the challenge, and the badasses realize that they need to do something differently after losing two in a row. The good guys nominate Caramel, and the badasses nominate Mike, despite Caramel wanting Landon to be nominated. CT and Caramel argue over the choice, and Caramel tells CT to kiss his black ass, and CT accuses Caramel for throwing the race card out there. They see Mike as the leader, so they're going to do the same thing that they did in the past. Caramel complains to Derek, and CT is getting more annoyed with Caramel. Abram not nominating Mike added to the speculation about the two having a deal or an alliance. Tina asks Mike about the alliance with Abram, he denies it again, and Abram decides to snap at Tina randomly, and the two of them start going at it pretty hard, to the point where he ends up throwing a bottle against the floor outside. And you definitely see more of his aggressive nature as the seasons go on, and it isn't an act, and he'll do stuff like this in real life, as we now know. Paramount feels defeated and is ranting about CT to Tina, but he feels comfortable with going against Landon. The Lifesaver Challenge is called Dodge a Ball, and it's just a generic dodgeball challenge in the ocean. Caramel refuses to go in the water since a snake was in there and he had a defeatist attitude even before that, which is pissing off his team. Honestly, it's just really lame, and he would represent the start of the quote unquote black person can't swim or do shit in water trope that the show is known for. Landon NCT wins the lifesavers, and Landon tells Mike that he is debating saving Mike from the Inferno, and Mike is offended by it. I also think Mike wants to be in elimination to market his wrestling, athletic career, persona, or whatever. Landon does decide to go into the Inferno to save Mike, which pisses the latter off, and the elimination is called Knock Your Block Off. And we've seen this challenge several times, where you need to knock someone out of the boundaries or whatever border that is set. To the shock of absolutely no one, Landon beats Caramel, and CT, Abram, and Derek refuse to say bye to him. Honestly, Caramel really just wasn't right for the show, and his last showing was just really pathetic on all levels. He definitely had personality, but it wasn't one that was going to thrive on the challenge. Luckily for him, he went on to do greater pastures that is a lot more fitting for him. Mike and Jody are joking around, and there is a bet that she has to jump naked into the pool if she loses their card game, and we do see her do it. The trio of Veronica, Rachel, and Tina are looking at pictures of Tanya, and they start making fun of her, and she's really getting annoyed with them. We do see Jody and Derek talking to one another since they're from the same Road Rule season, despite them being on opposite teams this season. Filling the caps is the challenge where they have to clog the holes in the tube as it is filling the large tank, and they have to be creative with how they clog it, as they use many different body parts to do it. It's a very creative challenge, and seeing Dan make fun of CT for everything being sexual with him was pretty great. Dan in general is just very funny this season. The badasses win the challenge, and the good guys has some plan to get to their opponents to reveal who they want in. And the badasses want Jody in, and while Derek did not vote for her, he didn't help her out either. Jody and Veronica are voted into elimination, and the good guys revealed that they changed their vote after Jody was revealed in, since Tanya would have been voted in had Shavana been voted in first. Tina, Rachel, and Veronica pop off on the good guys for them claiming to change their vote last minute, as they see it as cheating and a really dirty move, where Julie and Jody have to defend themselves for their choice, and they even have to defend themselves to Derek, where he sees it as the dirty move. Jody feels guilty only because Derek is reacting like this, though she doesn't give a crap about how everyone else reacts, and Julie has to convince her to not feel bad. Dan then decides to confront Jody, and he claims that she is crying because Mike doesn't like her romantically, and that's the basis for all of this. The Mean Girl trio and Dan just tag team Jody, hoping that it will weaken her, and they're just letting her have it, which definitely isn't the best look on any of them. Veronica, Rachel, Dan, Tina, and Derek are ranting about how pretty it is, and Jody mentions that she doesn't care about the shit that they're doing, but her team needs to be completely behind her with this choice, and Brad realizes that Jody gets into her own head at times, despite being a good competitor. The Lifesaver challenge is called Zip Up, where they pull themselves into some sort of incline of some sorts, but because there's a plasma TV on the line, no one is throwing the competition. And it was the plan to throw it to Veronica before this, or at least with the badasses side. The good guys win the challenge, with CT and Landon winning the Life Shielders. That's a wrap is the elimination where they have to wrap themselves and then runs to get a flag. Honestly, it's a lame elimination to be honest, and Veronica does beat Jody. I do think Jody had a final few episodes in the season that were interesting, and it was cool watching her here, where in general on the challenge she has a reputation of quote unquote being boring. She definitely made her mark on the season, but I do think she was overshadowed by a lot of the women, especially the veterans, and especially for most of her time on the season. We see the house meeting or messing with one another, and Dan is talking to Abe about the alleged alliance once again with Mike, though they think that Tina, the one who spread it, or at least in their opinion, is full of crap. Mike is feeling a way that people are scared of Landon and not him. Again, I think this is tied to his wrestling persona and career rather than anything else actually in the house, or his capabilities in the house. Tanya is talking about her life and how she grew up in a bunch of foster homes, isn't close to her biological parents, while also admitting that the Mean Girl trio are getting to her mentally. The challenge is called Never Ending Climb, where they have to grab 40 tribal tokens, and it's kind of a standard challenge in my opinion. Julie is panicking about having to do the challenge, but the good guys do win the challenge. Tanya is getting tired of the three women since they didn't even congratulate her for doing well in the challenge, and Dan has to give her good advice on how to handle them. The good guys decide to nominate Abram, and we see Dan snapping at Tina, especially in the group meeting, before they nominate Mike. Tanya calls out the three women, and Rachel mentions that she is the one making the drama a big deal and kind of victim blaming Tanya. So Tanya tells them that she is tired of them crap talking her, and there are other comments from Veronica and Tina that she's playing the victim as well. Everyone is having a good time in the car, and Mike gives Brad a wedgie. Brad ends up laughing about it initially, but then he really snaps once they exit the van, as he is just lashing out, slamming his hands on the van, and the two continue arguing once they get back into the house. It's clear that Brad is drunk as hell, and his knuckle is bleeding, where Mike is looking at him like he is batshit crazy. What a Drag is the Life Shield Challenge, where they are driving as fast as they can and as close to the finish line where there's a stack of glass stacked up on top of one another and in front of this line, and obviously they can't go into the glass. CT ends up breaking one of the cars, so everyone has to drive individually after that, though it was initially in pairs. Team Badass ends up winning the challenge as the life shields go to CT once again and Mike for the third time. Landon, Brad, and Darrell agree to pick out of a hat pertaining to which one of the three will be nominated, and Brad's name is pulled out of the hat. Brad and Abram are competing in the first balls in elimination, and we all know that this is a classic elimination on the show. Abram ends up beating Brad in a very close battle, and because Abe is chewing too much, Darrell for some reason gets so offended, tells him that he will beat his ass, and they end up going back and forth, and it's just so ridiculous. Brad was definitely more fun here this season than he was last season, though he did have his moments of shit talking, and of course the entire Reggie situation is just beyond ridiculous. Overall, he was fun and likable enough without being under the radar or boring, so I'm looking forward to see where his journey goes, or remember where he ends up going. Landon and Derek decide to wrestle outside of the club, and they're having a lot of fun initially, but it got a bit too serious, and Derek's ear ended up bleeding. We've seen a scene or two of them kind of doing something similar to this earlier on in the season, so clearly the editors included it here and there for the continuity. Landon is drunk out of his mind, and he almost falls through his decline several times while entering the house and walking up the stairs. Once he is passed out, the house decides to write a bunch of ridiculous things on his back. Derek decides to shave a part of Landon's head while he's asleep, and the cast takes a picture of it. Landon wakes up and realizes that a part of him is bald. We then see the trio of women while this is all happening, talking to Tanya, and Julie feels bad for her. And this is happening while Landon is getting his awful haircut, where his hair ends up looking like cheap devil horns. The challenge is called Riddle Me This, where they have to paddle these huge ass fake things through the sea of boat paddles. The challenge itself is pretty boring, but the badasses flopping the challenge was fun, as well as them cheating. Oh, I think they were boys or some sort that they were trying to row or whatever. Um, Anyways, of course, the good guys win the challenge. Julie is known for switching votes last minute, so the badasses are worried, and the Mean Girl trio wants Julie into elimination, since she's getting too close to Tanya and isn't trustworthy in general, though it is clear that Julie wants to compete against Veronica. Julie and Tanya are voted into the Inferno. Rachel, Veronica, and Tina are kissing up to Tanya, which is so convenient, and she immediately knows that it's because they hope that she doesn't choose them if she ends up winning the lifesaver. The challenge is Time to Ride, where they have to ride these weird bikes across a trail on the water, which is a ridiculous but kind of funny challenge to watch. Landon and Derek win the lifesaver, so Tanya and Julie will remain being nominated and will face one another in the Inferno. The elimination is called Patchwork, where they are wearing onesies that have patches on it, and they have to rip it off one another, and you have to put the patches in the basket while being attached to the bungees. We've seen this challenge here and there throughout the seasons and throughout the eras, so it's kind of consistent, but not really. Anyways, Tanya barely beats Julie, and of course the trio of women are really pissed off because they really wanted her gone. Julie came off as more muted and calm this season, though it might have been due to her being married, or her trying to self-edit herself, since she really didn't look good on her last season. Her being on the good guys team was a complete joke, since people talk about how she tried to take someone out and just her entire crazy Karenness in general. But I'm assuming they did this due to her religion. I think with a bunch of other crazier personalities on this season, her craziness in general was overshadowed in comparison. The boys are belly flopping, and some of them are outright streaking, where Tanya decides to join the guys. CT talks to Veronica and Rachel about having less members will benefit them in the finals. And it's interesting how he has this mentality, especially with what would happen to him on the Gauntlet 3 and War of the Worlds 2 when it comes to this matter. Anyways, he's talking about wanting to vote in Dan, but Veronica and Rachel don't seem as agreeable regarding this, and Dan is talking to Derek about this exact thing. So I think the women were pretty close to Dan, and CT mentioned that he doesn't want to split his prize money more than he needed to, hence him wanting Dan in. If memory serves, is the challenge where they have to look at the details of the objects in the room and rearrange it so all of the details can fit. And I don't care for this challenge, to be honest. The good guys win the challenge, and the badasses don't like that the good guys are catching up regarding the wins. The good guys decide to nominate Dan, though a few of them want to throw in CT, but the former is guaranteed to win against whichever man who goes in, and the badasses nominate Landon. And pretty much knows that he is screwed, and he tells people that he knew his position was going to be this from the very beginning of the season, and he keeps on mentioning that he isn't as cutthroat or in need of the win as the others. Things are tense between CT and Dan, since the former is asking the latter what Dan will do if he wins the lifesaver. And it's clear that CT is just doing this for self-preservation reasons. Something about a mother was mentioned on Dan's end, and it's just very awkward to watch them converse. Crab grab is the challenge where they are getting buried in the sand up to the necks while crabs walk around them. This was pretty neat, to be honest. They have to grab as much crabs as they can after digging themselves out from the ground in order to win. The two of Dan and CT continue arguing again right before the challenge, and it's just an entire mess. Honestly, CT's energy with a few of the gay men in the early seasons always seems pretty weird to me. Darrell and CT win the lifesavers, and Landon is annoyed that Darrell abandoned the team and went in it for himself. They had a discussion earlier on in the episode about getting Landon the lifesaver, but Darrell is just very self-serving, which he should be. And there's definitely some tension here. The elimination is called pegged, where they have to climb a wall with the pegs that they have, and we've seen variations of this elimination after this. Landon does end up beating Dan here. I did find Dan to be very fun and an electric rod in the season, especially in the confessionals. His sense of humor really stood out in the season, and I'm kind of sad that this is his final season, as I think his commentary would have added a lot more to Era 2 and future seasons. But he really wasn't good competitively, and it didn't seem like he had the fights to win or the mental strength in order to want to win, so maybe it's for the best that his run ends here. Tanya calls out the woman for taking naked pictures of her, which is just so disgusting, and they went way too far with this. And the woman end up showing this to people, and obviously I'm referring to Rachel, Tina, and Veronica. So she tells the woman to leave her alone, and they continue following her when she moves to sleep in another room. The challenge is Heart Race Bungee, and we see Abram and Tina going at it once again before the challenge takes place, where he hopes that she goes in and goes home, though the woman wants to nominate Shavanda, which does end up happening since they have to nominate someone before the challenge this time. Tanya is then chosen by Shavanda to be the other nominee. And having someone from the other team choose, like just the nominee, choose the other nominee was kind of interesting but kind of weird here. Anyways, the challenge is that they have to bungee from a platform, and it's honestly just kind of, we've seen many challenges like this before and since that are just better and more interesting television in comparison. The good guys win the challenge, and the life shields are given to Landon and CT, shocking to absolutely no one. The elimination is spinner, where they literally spin around on a circular platform. And I remember the elimination was done on World of Worlds with Polly, Cam, and their partners, essentially. Without the puzzle element, and Tanya beats Shavanda. I literally do not remember a thing about Shavonda throughout the season. It is impressive that she made it very far on the season as a rookie, especially since this is the start of the rookie treatment on the show. But it really is shocking that she never came back after the season since there's just nothing there. The final is called Montezuma's Revenge, where they swim to unlock chains on a floater. They roll 2K, and then they end up riding some sort of bike, or they ride a bike to unlock chains, where they then go on a 5K run. It is clear that the badasses are starting to fall apart, and they start bickering even more, and Tanya is seen as the weaker link amongst the team. Honestly, this final really wasn't interesting to watch, and it's one of the lamer finals in my opinion. Anyways, they unlock a treasure chest, and the good guys end up winning the season. I'm going to group the trio of Rachel, Veronica, and Tina together, since they were seen as the same in the edit at least, and they definitely brought the drama, though some of their actions were just a bit too much. I now get why they have the reputation that they do now. Tanya's clearly massively disliked by now during her challenge career, and you start to see her relationship with alcohol become more prominent here, but she did have a solid underdog run here, and she is more interesting as a character this season, which was kind of building off the momentum from her in last season. Derek had a funnier ride on the season, with the wrestles with Landon and not being smothered by some of the vets. I am shocked that he was a lot more interesting in his earlier seasons than his later seasons. Abram is Abram. He's going to do something crazy. He's going to get into some fights, but this still isn't one of his crazier seasons, just from my memory. CT was definitely unlikable this season, though he himself wasn't really given the main character treatment like he would be in future seasons, and I think that's kind of what's shocking to me with watching CT's first two seasons, especially. So I think this was a really good final season for Mike to end his challenge career on. As he redeemed himself performance-wise from last season, he didn't have any annoying showman, and the drama wasn't as strong as there was in prior seasons for him, though he got his wrestling persona down pat. Landon was a very strong rookie, and he was a lot more fun and loose than I remembered here, with his drunken antics and wrestling. One of the few standout and memorable rookies of the season, though he wouldn't have the more fun element in him in his latter seasons. Which leads to Jamie, who was very forgettable on the season. She was very under the radar, and she really did nothing notable. It is impressive that she won her only season, for sure. But she went on to do better things and is a legit actress, which is fit for her. I forgot how under the radar Darrell was throughout the early portions of his challenge career, though he did have some fiery and funny moments throughout his season, or this season here. It's cool to see that he won his first three seasons in a row. Okay, so there is some sort of reunion that actually managed to have access to, but it's more of what happened with the Gauntlets quote-unquote reunion, where it's all of them in like some sort of confessional and they're just talking about what happened throughout the season. So they talk about the good guys not really being good, with Brad getting arrested during the season, Landon running around with knives, Judy biting people, and Mike not being deserving of his good guy status. Everyone talked about how Tanya tried to hook up with every guy, but Landon was the only one who bit into it, and they both ended up regretting it. They talked about how Shavonda and Landon slept together on their initial season. I think it might have been the real world, though I'm not too sure about that, but they didn't speak to one another at all during the season. Jody's hookup with Mike and Landon were talked about, and the Mean Girl trio talked about how they gave themselves the title, though some people claim that Tanya came onto the season wanting to fight with someone for camera time and to be as iconic as Coral. The others commented about how Mike picked the fight about Landon going in on or going into elimination with Carmel, who wanted to go home. Carmel wanted to go home apparently, and he picked the fight because it was a bad look on his wrestling career. So my commentary about this throughout the video was correct and stated by the cast, which makes sense. They also mentioned how Beth's nice edit was really ridiculous and how she didn't want to be on camera without makeup, and she brought a picture of Mark so she could stir up drama. There's also talk about alliances, and apparently there was an alliance with Abram and Darrell, which is what their arguments during the elimination was really about. Overall, the season was just really, really fun. It seems like the Inferno seasons have stronger formats that not only created more drama, but it created more competition, whether it was between the actual two teams, the eliminations, and a lot of the eliminations that they chose to use here were very good as well. I felt like the veterans that they got here were really good, and my issue with this season, and even with the prior Inferno season, is that the rookies in general are just notably weak. A lot of them are rightfully one season wonders, and it's really the vets who made this season as good as it is. And this would be a theme with a lot of other seasons where the veterans make the show, but the rookies really are just weak and unnotable. Overall, there's a lot of drama in the season, and you can tell that they really had their group of veterans that they wanted to use for a while, and some of them have been on for a while at this point in general. At the same time, I did feel like a lot of the people on the season had like big heads. They knew they were the veterans and the stars of the show. They knew they were getting a lot of opportunities for college tours and bar tours outside of the show, and they were kind of prioritizing that over the show. So you'd start to see a lot of them leave after the season or after the next few seasons afterwards. And this is also around the time where Road Rules was cancelled, so there was definitely a casting issue where a lot of the cast would want higher pay disputes to do more seasons. Even in the reunion, there's a lot of talk of some of the cast taking a break or not doing it anymore, so there's already kind of that they were in that headspace. And then with Road Rules getting cancelled, that cut off half of their casting pool. So it shows why 2 seasons after this, they would do fresh meat. So overall, this is either my favorite or my second favorite of the era so far. And it was really refreshing watching this again after almost a year and having the context of the first 9 seasons. So I am going to do a video talking about the era as a whole, the evolution made in the era, the standout people from the era from a competitive, strategic, character point of view, and really just analyze the era in itself. That might come next, or that might come after I do some of the Era 2 seasons, so it might come after the Gauntlet 2, Fresh Meat seasons, or whatever. It really just depends on how I pace things. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with something soon. Bye!